everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to show you how to install MySQL into your local computer and also create and design a database from scratch. So MySQL is a database management system that uses structured query language. It is one of the most popular relational database systems out there, and it offers a lot of flexibility with comprehensive support and ensures data protection. So let's get started with this video. So in order to install MySQL into your local computer, just type this link dev.mysql.com/download/installer, and this page is going to open on your browser, and then you come over to the second installer community edition and click on download. Once you click on download and this page shows, you just click here to start your download. And once you're downloading, you can equally check the progress of your downloads. Once my download is complete, I'll just go over to my file and click to open it. Then right here in my file, I'll click on the downloads folder, and this is the installer. So I'm going to right click on it and then click to open with Windows installer. So we're just going to wait for it to take us to the next page for us to proceed. Then on this dialog box, I'm going to click here. So for some security reasons, this particular part of the video may be showing blank. So just take note of that. I'm going to click yes and then wait for it to open. So MySQL installer has opened up in this dialog box, and it says we should choose a setup type. As beginners, it is advisable that you choose full. So yeah, when you select full, it's going to install all MySQL products and features for you to use. Then after then, you can now click next. Once you click next, these are the products that will be installed when you click execute. So I'm just going to click execute and just wait for it to install. So this is going to take a little bit of time. I'm just going to skip this process and show you when it is fully completed. Right now, all the products have been installed. So I'm just going to click next. Then I'll proceed to click next. So on this next dialog box, I'm just going to click next. I'll click next. And then this dialog box shows us a space to type a password. So if you're typing a password, make sure you type memorable passwords that you can remember. If not, you may not be able to access your SQL Server. So I'm going to retype the password. After then, I'm just going to click next. So on this page, I'll click next. And then I'll just keep clicking next. For here, I'll just click to execute. So I'll wait for all these configuration steps to execute. So once this configuration steps is done executing, I'm just going to click finish. And once I click finish, I'm going to click next, and then I'll click finish. Then I'll click next, and right here I'm going to type the password. So I'm going to type my password. Then I'll click to check if the connection is successful. So connection succeeded, so I can proceed to click next. And right here I'm just going to click execute. So after this operation is completed, I'm just going to click finish, and then I'll click next and I'll click finish. So here you have options. It says start MySQL workbench after setup. That means you want the workbench to start automatically after setup, and you also want MySQL shell to start after this setup. I don't want MySQL shell to start after this setup, so I'm going to unselect it. I want only the workbench to open for now. We'll open the shell later on. Then I'm going to click finish. MySQL workbench has opened up, and this is the welcome screen. So right here under MySQL connections, I'm just going to click here. Then it's going to ask for that password. Remember I said create memorable passwords, so you'll be able to access your server and of course your MySQL workbench. So I'm going to type my password. And click OK. Once I type my password and click OK, it has opened up MySQL. So some of these queries you're seeing are from the former files that I had, because I had the previous version of MySQL before proceeding to install the new version. Okay, so right here you can see this is the query screen where you are going to write all your queries, and where you have action output, this is where your output pane is. It's going to show everything if your queries are successful or if you have encountered an error. And right here is just the navigation screen, which shows all the schemas that are currently here. So these are the system schemas right here in this particular workbench. So this is how you can install MySQL Server into your local computer. The next thing we're going to do is to create and design a database from scratch. And we're going to use the command line for MySQL. You can use this workbench to create all those queries. So just use what you're comfortable with. All the lines of code, all the queries that we'll be doing in this video, you can actually use this MySQL workbench to write all those lines of code. But if you want to use the command line, just come to your Sage, and I'm going to type MySQL, and it's going to show me all MySQL products that I have here. So you can see some of the products that were installed. So I have MySQL command line right here. I'm just going to double click to open it. So in MySQL command line, it is asking us to enter a password. The password you're going to enter is the password that you created when you were installing MySQL. So I'm going to enter my password and then press enter. So once I press enter, it has opened up MySQL monitor for me. Remember, I said all the lines of code that we're going to write here, you can use MySQL workbench to do this. So first I'm going to type show databases. So show databases, just as the name implies, is just going to show the available databases within MySQL. So right now, these are the databases available for now. These are the system database that came with MySQL. Then we are going to create a new database. I'll start by typing drop database. We'll say drop database if exists HR. So basically, this line of code is saying if there's any database that has the name HR, drop the database. Dropping means delete the database right off MySQL. So I'm going to press enter, and once I press enter, I'm going to now create a database. So I'm going to create a database called HR. Remember, every line of code should be terminated with a semicolon. So I'm going to let me expand this so we can see what I'm doing. I'm going to type a semicolon and then press enter. So right now we've created a database. If I go back to show databases and press enter, you can see that HR has been included because we've created a database HR. But right now there are no tables or there's no data within that database, but we've created a database. Before we move on to create tables for a database, I would like to talk about some important data types and constraints that we will be using in this particular video. So what are data types? Data types just define values, the type of values that a particular column should hold. So we have some string data types that we're going to use. We'll use char. So char is just like a fixed length string. It can actually contain letters, numbers, and even special characters. So I'll also be using varchar. Varchar is a variable length string. It also contains letters as well, numbers, and you can actually place some restrictions using column values. So there's another data type called enum. So the argument here is value 1, value 2, and to the end value. So this particular data type is a string object that can have one value from a list of possible values. So this means that if this data type is set, you have to choose from one of those possible values. If not, that particular entry will return blank. So for our numeric values, we have small integers, we have medium integer, or it's also called integer, and also we have what we call numeric or decimal data type. So this numeric or decimal data type, they have two arguments, which is precision and scale. So precision is just the maximum number of digits that you should have, and the scale is the number of digits that should be there after the decimal point. Then we're also going to use the data type. So for constraints are used to specify rules for certain data on a particular table. Okay, so we're going to use not null. Not null does not ensures that a particular column does not have any null values. Then for primary key is going to uniquely identify a particular row or record in a table. Then foreign key is going to uniquely identify a record or rows in another table. Then for auto increment, it's for a unique set of values, so it's going to increment it anytime you input a new record. Then we have a particular constraint called on delete cascade. So for on delete cascade, the constraint just tells you that if a particular entry is being removed from a parent table, that the entry should also be removed from the child table. We'll see it later in action. So let's say we have table A and table B. Table A is the parent table, and you are using a foreign key to reference a primary key or an information in the parent table. So it means that once that value is being deleted from the parent table, which is table A, the value should also be deleted from table B. So I'll just go ahead and show you the data sets that we're using. So this is the data sets that we will be using to create a database in MySQL. Okay, so this data set was gotten from FP20 challenge, and it was created by Federico Pastor. I hope I got that name correct. So this is the data set. It consists of employees information. So I have actually normalized these data sets by breaking them down into different tables that we would use to create our database. Normalization is just a process of organizing your data in a database where you have to create tables and relationships between these tables. It's actually a very good idea that you brainstorm the type of columns that should be in a particular table. Once you have those list of columns, you can now use set normalization rules to determine which particular column you want to include in any table. So these are the tables that we will be creating in our database. So let's just go on and start with the creation of a database. I'll come back to my command line, and on my command line right now I'm going to type use hr and close it with a semicolon and press enter. So I think I should just minimize this command line so that you can see whatever I am typing right here, so you can follow along. So in order to create our first table, we're going to use the create table command. So we'll say create table. The first table that we want to create is the jobs table. So I'm going to type jobs and then open a parenthesis. I'll press shift and enter to go to the next line. Once I press shift and enter, I'll press tab to actually indent this particular line of code that I'm writing. So the first column here says job ID. I'm just going to show you a few of how you can type this. So our job ID is going to be an integer and is also going to be our primary key. And we also want it to auto increment. No, our job ID should not be auto increment. If you can see my cursor, this is our job ID right here on this Excel file right here. So it should not be auto increment. I'm just going to put a comma and then press shift and enter and then press my tab key. Then the second column should be a job title. So after job title, a job title should have a variable length of 50. It should have, let's just give it a variable length of 100 and we'll set it to not null. That means this particular column should not have a null value. I'm going to put a comma and then press shift and enter, indent it, and the next column is going to be minimum salary. So for minimum salary, we're going to use the numeric data type, and the precision is going to be 9 while the scale is going to be 2. Remember, I explained it when I briefly explained our data types. So here all the constraint 2 is going to be not null. Then I'm going to put a comma and then go to the next line. Then for the next line, I'm going to type our max salary, which is the maximum salary for that particular job title, and use the numeric data type and type 9,2. That's the precision and the scale, and it's also going to be not null. Then once I'm done with this, I'll just, since I don't have any column again, so if I shift this, you can see the columns for the job table on the Excel sheet. So once I'm done with that, I'm just going to press shift and enter, and then close it, close the parentheses, and then terminate this particular query with a semicolon. Then I'm going to press enter. So you see that we've created a table now, which is called jobs. So the next table we're going to create is the department table. So let me go to department table over here and just open up my command line. So let's create department table. So we'll create table departments. So for table department, we're going to press enter, indent this table. The first column there is going to be department ID, and our department ID is going to be an integer. So this is going to be our primary key, and we want it to auto increment. We want it to increase as there's a new record in this particular table. So I'm going to type auto increment, then put a comma, and then press shift and enter to go to the next line, indent it, and the second column is going to be department name. So department name, we want it to be a variable length, so we're going to type for department length, I'm going to type varchar, and I'll just allow it to stay at 50, and then close that particular bracket, and then I'll give it a constraint of not null, and then I'll go to the next line, because for this particular table we have only 2 columns. So I'm just going to go to the next line and then close this bracket, close it with a semicolon, and press enter. So we've created that table. The next table we're going to create is the branch table. So right here in the branch table, I'm just going to open the Excel sheet so you see where we're typing the columns from. Let me readjust this a little. So right here, I'm just going to create the table for the branch. Then I'm going to put a parenthesis, press shift and enter, indent this. The first column is branch ID. So the first column is branch ID, and this branch ID we're going to use a char val data type. So the char data type should have 3. That's the fixed length, it should be 3, and this is going to be our primary key. I'll put a comma and then press shift and enter. Then I'll indent this and type the branch name for the second column. So for the branch name, we're going to use a varchar. So varchar should be 50, and it should not be null. It shouldn't have any null value. So I'm going to type that, put a comma, go to the next line and indent the next line. Then I'm going to type country. So for country is also going to be a varchar, and that's a variable character. Then I'm going to make it 50. I'm going to type the n as 50, and it also should not have null values. Then when I'm done, I'm going to press shift and enter, close the parentheses, close with semicolon, and press enter. So we've created 3 tables so far for this. If you want to see the 3 tables that we've created, you can just type show tables. So if I type show tables here and press a semicolon and press enter, you see that it has shown the tables in HR database, which is branch, department, and jobs table that we have created already, but right now these tables do not have any data with them. We have 2 more tables to create. So the next table we're going to create is the employees table. So I'm just going to click on the employees data here and open up my command line. So for the employees table, we're going to type create table employees. So create table employees, I'll open the brackets, press shift and enter, go to the next line, indent this, and the first column is the employee ID number, which is going to be our integer, and this is also going to be our primary key. So the second column is going to be first name of the employees, and I'm going to type first name. So for first name, we're going to use a varchar. We'll say first name 50. So first name should not be null, not null. I'll put a comma, go to the next line. Then the third column is going to be last name. Last name should also be a varchar, and it should be 50. The length should be 50. It should also not be null. That means the last name should be imputed as well. Then I'm going to press shift and enter. For the next column is gender. So for gender column, we're going to use enum data type. So for this enum data type, we're going to impute either male. So I'm going to enclose these characters in a quote because it's a string character. Then I'm going to enclose the female. So this says that it should either be male or female. So if you are imputing data for this particular column, you either type M or F. If not, it's going to return a blank row or a blank record for that particular space. So I'm going to close this and then say not null. Then the next column is email. So for email, it's going to be varchar. We're going to give it 100, and we say not null for the constraint. Then we'll go over to the next column. The next column is going to be date of birth. So let me shift this. So the next column is going to be date of birth. So for date of birth, we're going to use a date column. Then the constraint is going to be not null. I'll put a comma, go to the next line. Then for the next column, employee age. So the age of employee, we want to use a small integer for it, and it should not be null as well. So I'm going to type not null, put a comma, go to the next line, and the next column says marital status. Marital status. So for marital status, we're going to make it a varchar. Let's say varchar of 50, and we're not going to add any constraints there. So I'm going to put a comma, go to the next line. So for the next line, we have to impute our hire date column, the dates that employees were hired. So for the hire date column, we're just going to use a date. I will have a constraint of not null. At least any date that an employee was hired, there should be a date for it. I'm going to put a comma and then press shift and enter. Then after the next column here is going to be our branch ID. So remember, we have a branch ID in the branch table, so this is going to be a foreign key. So I'm just going to type it. Remember, we'll also have to use the exact data type so we don't encounter any errors. Once you're referencing a column in another table, make sure that those two columns share the same data type. If not, you will encounter some errors. So I'm just going to type the chav and type 3. That was the data type there. Then I'm going to put a comma sign and press shift and enter. The next column after indenting is going to be our job ID. Remember, job ID is already there in the jobs table, so this is also going to be a foreign key. So I'm going to type integer, and the next one is the department ID. So I'm going to press shift and enter. I'll type my department ID. So department ID is still going to be an integer as well. Remember, the department ID that we had here in this table is actually an integer, so we should give it the same data type. Then I'm going to put a comma and press and enter. So for the next column, we're going to have our annual salary. So our annual salary is going to be a numeric value or decimal data type. They're the same thing, and it should not be null. Then I'm going to press shift and enter, and we're going to create the bonus column, and it should also have the numeric data type. So we'll type this, and it should also not be null. For the 3 keys that were in another table, we're going to create foreign keys to those particular columns. So I'm going to put a comma sign here, press shift and enter. Then I'll type foreign key. Remember, foreign key uniquely identifies a record in another table. So I'm going to type foreign key. So the foreign key, the first foreign key here is going to be our branch ID. So I'm going to put a parenthesis there, and I'll type references. So I'm going to type references. So we're going to reference the table that has the branch ID, which is the branch table. So we're going to type the table and also type the column itself, which is the branch ID column, and close the brackets. Then I'll put a comma and then go to the next line. So we'll have to create foreign keys for the other columns as well. So we say foreign key, the other one is job ID column. So for job ID column, I'm going to close the brackets. I'll type references, and we're going to reference it to the jobs table. Yes, we're going to reference it to the jobs table, and we'll type the column which is job ID. Then I'm going to put a comma and type the last foreign key. So the last foreign key is for our department ID. So for our department ID, I'm going to type references. We are referencing department. So we'll type department ID and close the bracket. Then I'll just go to the next line, close the parentheses for the create table employees, and then close it with a semicolon. Then I'm going to press enter. So we've created table for employees. So for the last table, I'm just going to copy the code and write it here and then explain. So for the last table, which is the job histories table, I'm just going to paste this code here. And once I paste this code, this is what this code. So for this particular table, we have employee ID, we have job ID. These are the columns for this table. Then this is for the on delete cascade. So we are referencing a column in the employees table. So it means that if a record is removed from, if any employees record is removed from the employees table, the record should also be removed from this job history table. So I'm just going to press enter, and of course we now have the table. So if I type to show tables, so if I type to show the tables in this particular database and press enter, you can see that we have 5 tables created in our HR database. So these are our database, and we'll go ahead to populate these tables with actual values. So this is what we're going to do. I'll go back to my Excel file. For this particular table, I've actually used a function, concat function, to combine all of these values together to get this particular column, because I want to insert multiple rows at once without having to type one after the other. Okay, so right now I'm just going to, in order to do that, I'll come over to my command line. So we're going to use our insert into statement. I'm going to type insert into jobs, then I'll press shift and enter, go to the next line and type values, then I'll press shift and enter. So since we have quite a number of rows and I want to use the multiple rows to insert, so I'm going to select this entire column, copy it, and then come over to my command line. Then right here I'm going to paste it. Then this dialog box shows I'm going to click to paste. So you see that the data has been populated. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other tables. So this is going to save us some time. So the next table I want to insert into is department. Then I want to insert values. I'll come over to my Excel, click on department table, and then I'm going to select this, come to my and paste it here, and it has entered. So the next one we're going to insert into. So remember, like I said, you can use MySQL workbench to type all these lines of code. So if you find that easier for you to use and understand, just use it. The most important thing is that you understand the basic concept of what you're doing. So I'm going to press shift and enter. We're going to insert into branch. These are the values. I'm going to press shift and enter, and then I'll click on branch. Then I'm going to select this. I'm going to copy that, show this, and then paste. Then we have 2 more tables to go. I'm going to insert into employees. So employees, the table is quite, we have up to like over 200 rows. So I'm going to press shift and enter. I'm going to type values and shift and enter. So for employees, I'm going to select here. So I'm going to select this entire data and copy it. Then I'll come over to my command line and paste it. So these tables I've entered, and the last table here we're going to insert data into is job history. So I'm going to insert into job history and press shift and enter. We're going to do values, press shift and enter. Then I'll just quickly come to job history and select this entire column. So I'm going to select this column, copy this column, and then I'll go over to my command line and then paste it. Once I paste this, you see that the rows have actually entered. So something that is very important for you to note is the way you created columns in your table. Make sure when you are inserting values, you are inserting the values according to the way the columns were in your table. If not, you may actually end up imputing values to the wrong columns, or you encounter an error if it is columns that have different data types. You encounter an error. But if it is a column that have the same data type, you may impute the wrong values in a different column. So make sure you take note of all of those things. So we've actually created tables into our database and we've populated it with values. So let's say we want to view some few rows of our data set, and we use the select statement. So let's say we use select. We want to select all from, so I'll press shift and enter. We want to select all from, let's say, job history. Job history is one of the tables in our employee data set. So job history, and we want to limit the results to 10. So we're going to use the limit clause. We want to limit the result to 10. Use the limit clause and then press enter. So you can see it has returned a table of the job history for us in this particular table. So you can explore every other table that is here. So let's say we want to see for employees. So let's say we want to see all the data for employees. Sorry, we're going to use the from clause, from employees. So we'll use a where clause. So we'll say let's select all from the employees, where maybe the employee age. So we use the employee age column. So we use a between clause. Let's say the age is between 35 and, let's say the age is between 35 and 40, and we can press enter. We don't know how many there are for now, so we can also limit the results to 3 if there is any, and close this with a semicolon and press enter. So right now some employees have been returned. It's just that let me expand this because this particular employees table has a lot of columns. So we have some employees that have certain age. So we said where employee age between 35 and 40. So between 35 and 40, and we limited the result to the first 3. So this is the result that has returned. And if you look at the employee age, this is 36, 39, 39. So this is how you can create a database from scratch. And also it is something that it's very important. So if you're a data analyst, data engineer, or you work in the data field, you can use this to create a portfolio project for yourself. So the next thing we'll create now is the entity relationship diagram for this particular database. Remember, our workbench was still open, so I'll just go over to the workbench. If I click here to refresh this schema, you can see the HR data set that we created and everything. So let's say I want to use this HR data set. I'll double click on it. Once I double click on it, you can see that the HR data set is now bold. So let's say I write a query here to show the tables in the HR data set and put a semicolon. Let me delete this off. This is a former project. So let's say I want to show tables and I press enter. Okay, not press enter. This is not command line. So I'm going to just select it and then run. You don't need to select it. You can just leave your cursor to be there. I want to execute this portion. So show tables. You can see all the tables that are present in our database. Okay, so for us to create the entity relationship diagram, what we would do, since we already have a database, if you do not have a database, we'll have to use another way to create this diagram. But since you already have a database, once you select this database, you just click on database and select reverse engineer. So under this reverse engineer, since all of these have been populated well, I'm just going to click next, and it's going to ask for my password. I'm going to type the password. Then I'm going to press OK. So after then, I'm just going to click next, and I want this, it says select the schema you want to include. I want to use the HR schema, so I'm going to select the HR schema and I'm going to click next. I'll click next again. So it's going to import 5 total objects. That is the 5 tables that we have in the HR database. So I'm going to click to execute this. And after execution, I'm going to click next and then click finish. So right here, this is the entity relationship diagram for our database. So you can just readjust this. You can readjust this to fit what you want. You can readjust this. So let me just place it here, and let me bring this out here. So you can see these are the 5 tables that we created, and these folks here are just showing the relationship between these particular tables. Remember, we have a relationship between the employees table and here. So here is the branch here has the primary key, which you're seeing here, and this branch over here is a foreign key. So the same thing we have with department table. So we have a primary key of department ID here, and we have a foreign key of department ID. So if you hover on this relationship fork, it's just going to show you the different columns that are being used to establish relationships between these tables. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. I hope you learned something and you enjoyed this video as much as I did. So thank you so much.